All right, I'm going to talk about the auto advance feature through the setup assistant. So back in 1013, when Apple basically killed imaging, I've been, since that happened, I've been waiting for this feature to come out because I knew like, all right, if they're going to kill imaging, they're probably going to at least make some way for the setup assistant to be a little bit easier because although DEP is great or automated enrollment is great, someone still has to click through all these steps. Even if you skip as much as possible, they still have to skip through those different steps. So Apple has finally brought this auto advance, this setup assistant feature, and I was excited to dive in and figure out how this works and if it's going to help a lot of people through different workflows. Um, I guess I already did that slide. I explained what auto advance is, but yeah, basically it'll basically when you go through the setup assistant, if you are connected through Ethernet, it will basically automatically check all the boxes so that you get to it gets automatically enrolled in Jamf and it starts running all those policies. So a couple requirements to this, aka caveats. One I didn't put on here is it does need to be plugged in through Ethernet. So if you're just using Wi-Fi, if you don't provision your computers on Ethernet, probably not going to work for you. You also have to skip all the setup assistant steps. So when it goes through this, imagine a robot basically clicking next each time. If it requires any user interaction, it's going to fail, it's going to stop. You also can't require authentication or enrollment customizations, because again, that's going to require user interaction through this process. And you also must skip the account creation. And that's kind of the big caveat, because if you're skipping the account creation, you basically either need one shared account that everyone's logging into, or you need to use something like Nomad, Jamf Connect, or traditional binding to AD, or something like the Jump Cloud agent, or anything else that's like that, that will allow a user to log in with credentials and then provision the account. The cool thing is if you do use something like that, once the user does log in, they should theoretically already have all the packages and applications and everything they need once they log in. They don't need to wait for that stuff to happen. So I'm going to show you what this looks like. My testing setup, I have a MacBook Pro 16-inch. It's running the Intel processor, and I have a virtual machine running on there that has a spoofed serial number to one of my DEP computers. So that could kind of show this whole process a little bit easier. So in this process, my goal was to make the most automated way of doing this, of reprovisioning a computer. So in this case, imagine that, this is ABC company. We have a one-to-one environment with a bunch of Macs, and this is our process for reprovisioning the computers and giving it to a new user. So what I did is I put a button in self-service that they could click, it wipes the computer, and then once you click that button, until we get to the Jamf Connect login screen, I have Jamf Connect integrated with Octa. Until you get to the Jamf Connect login screen, the user's not doing anything. IT's not doing anything. It's completely automated. So let me show you what that looks like. Open up self-service. We have the easy button here. Click wipe. And then it's going to speed up a lot. Because I'm on a virtual machine, this process took like 20 minutes. Typically, if you're not on a virtual machine, if you're on an actual computer, it should take more like 10 minutes. Then you get to this screen, it waits for a little bit. I'd say up to like a minute. And as long as you don't touch anything, it automatically advances through all this stuff. I'm not touching anything right now. It's just getting automatically enrolled. And then you get to the Jamf Connect login screen. I gave it a little bit of time so it could install all the policies first. And then I logged in with my Octa credentials. It creates that user account. It's already logged in to Jamf Connect. The Jamf Connect window pops up explaining what they're doing. And this Microsoft data notice. So at this point, you could back when we're at the Jamf Connect screen. In this theoretical world, once you get to this screen and everything is installed, IT could give this to the user, and then the user could log in and already have all their stuff without having to wait the 10, 20, 30 minutes for all of their stuff to install. If you're in a lab situation, this is even better because then it can just go straight to the screen where the user can log in with their credentials and then get into their user account. And that's where we're talking about use cases. So
hey,
we
Chris,
got computer.
Amir has a good question in the chat if you can see that on your screen.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I can also question like that, so you don't have to read it. My big question is like moving forward is based on Apple's recommendation with enrolling, let's say with DEP. One of the biggest concerns is for the relationship between the Bootstrap token and secure token is established once a local user is set up through the account, through the setup assistant. Now, my question is, by using Octa and that and skipping as well in the pre-stage environment, we can kind of skip the automatic process and just log in. But how is then Octa establishing that Bootstrap token to the user, if that makes sense? Because moving forward, then I know there can be multiple issues with firewall.
Yes. Yeah, and I ran into some pretty big issues with that. So this is the theoretical, like, best case scenario of what it looks like. I guess a couple of things I would like to be able to do that I haven't figured out how to do yet. I'd like to be able to, you know, when the provisioning process is done, send, like, when it's at this screen and everything is done, send a notification to the user. But, oh shoot, got out of this. But another thing I ran into, which I'll get into more later, is, and I'm not sure how that, you know, Bootstrap token is getting created and how, like, the secure tokens are granted, but sometimes it would work. And especially on the M1 computer that I was testing on, sometimes it didn't. And if it didn't, it was really bad. I'll talk about that more a bit later. And maybe some other people know, like, what that back-end process is happening, but I definitely ran into some issues just with testing it. With this not being, you know, 100%, what's the word, consistent. So yeah, that's a good thing to note. But yeah, I guess use cases, computer labs, laptop rentals, offboarding employees. It can make this process a little bit quicker. What I want to do now is just, I'm going to very quickly kind of show you what I set up in Jamf. I'm not going to try to spend too much time on this, but just in case you're curious, let's see if I can bring my Jamf server down here. Okay. All right. So what do I have here? Like I said, I'm not going to go through I'll go through this very briefly, but I have a couple packages that I've set up here. I have this install Big Sur package that just puts Big Sur into the applications folder. I have Jamf Connect, and then I have a couple other things just to, like, run policies. This button that I created, the easy button, this is actually based on a blog post that Bill Smith had. Yeah. And I'll send some resources after this on how to, like, create some of this stuff. But this just goes through how you can create this easy button from start to finish. It's a pretty in-depth blog post. Essentially, really, it's just one line. It's using the Start OS inside of the Big Sur installer and then throwing some flags on there. This is kind of the one that does the real magic, erase install. And then this other stuff is to kind of help it be zero touch. Then I have the pre-stage inside of here. If I look at that, kind of typical things of making the MDM profile mandatory, preventing activation lock. None of those matter. The thing that really matters is this part where you automatically advance the setup assistant. And then you can have to choose a language and region, and then skip all the setup assistant steps. And for the account settings, you have to create a local administrator account before the setup assistant. And I think this is probably where the Bootstrap token comes into place and how it ends up granting the secure tokens to the first user that's logged in. But like I said, I've seen it not work, which makes me a little hesitant to actually use this feature in any of my environments. But then I'm skipping the account creation here. And then I'm also throwing my Jamf Connect package in here as well as my Jamf Connect configurations. And then in policies, I'm doing a couple different things here. I'm adding the Jamf Connect launch agent and my logos and background, which I'll show you in a second. And then my other policies right here that I was running. And I'm caching Big Sur before throwing the easy button in there just so it runs a bit faster. Very quick look. I know there's, you know, that was maybe going a little bit too fast, but I don't want to spend a ton of time on this. I just want to give a bird's eye view of kind of what this looks like. Diving back into here.
Chris, what before you move on to Jamf Connect, you told me when you were working with the M1 chip and the Bootstrap token wasn't created, you just said that was really bad. What happened?
I'll get to that later because I kind of have.
Okay.
I'm going to talk about that in a little bit.
You got to keep the people on the edge of their seat. I like it. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to get through the Jamf Connect stuff real quick. I know you guys probably know what Jamf Connect is already, and you've probably seen a lot of demos on it. But just to kind of show you what I've set up there and some of the main settings that I use when I set up Jamf Connect. All right. So this is Octa with Jamf Connect. It looks a lot different if you use other identity providers. But yeah, first of all, what is Jamf Connect? So Jamf Connect is a way to, it's kind of like binding to AD, except you're using an identity provider and then taking out most of the headache of what you go through when you traditionally bind to a computer. You've probably seen it in some demos and stuff. I'm going to show you a quick demo of what this looks like. So here I am at my login screen. I've branded it and I'm logging in for the first time. This actually creates my user account. Once I'm logged in, I get this little message right here. And then, so that was Jamf Connect login that I was using before. This is actually Jamf Connect. I can change my password through this portal. I can also reset my password. And if I click Get Software, it just opens up self-service. And then lastly, I can also, when I connect to the server, it opens up a web browser and logs me into Octa. One of the things I'm not demoing here is what happens when you change your password. So if you change your password outside of the Mac computer, right when Jamf Connect notices it, it will bring it up right away and make you sync your password back to what it was before, or to what your Octa one is. So should I get Jamf Connect is kind of the main question that people ask. And the answer is, it depends. Kind of a quick raise of hands or anything is that who's using Jamf Connect right now? Raise your hand, shout out, do whatever you want. We got one person.
Oh, we got some hands, we got some thumbs up.
Yeah. I don't know if I can see while I'm sharing the window very well while I'm in this screen.
Wes is laughing at you now.
That's usually how it goes. Yeah, the answer is it depends. Jamf Connect is a great tool. Do you absolutely need it in every environment? No, definitely not. One of the things I'll say is if you're currently binding to AD and you like the user experience of binding to AD, then Jamf Connect is probably a much better option than that. There's also Nomad, that's another solution. Nomad is basically Jamf Connect. It's just the free version. Jamf actually bought Nomad a couple years ago and turned it into Jamf Connect, but kept that free version there. Where Nomad excels is if you don't already have an identity provider, Nomad can connect directly to your local AD server. But it does require that you're in the office or on VPN or have an outward-facing AD server, which almost no one does. So if you don't have an identity provider and you don't plan on getting one, you really can't use Jamf Connect. And if you don't have an identity provider and you want to get one just for the sake of Jamf Connect, I would say probably not worth it. If you're also all right with your users just managing their own passwords and just want to make sure they're secure, you can deploy a password policy through Jamf and make sure that they have a secure password.
Dan, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I guess, I see Dan's chat in there. How is Jamf Connect different than Octa's upcoming FastPass? I have actually no clue because I have not used the FastPass through Octa. Does anyone have an experience with that to say one way or another which one is better?
Yeah, I guess what I was asking is not so much a question of better or worse, but I know they're looking to do something similar, but I know they can also work together. So if anyone has any experience with that, I'm just wondering if that's...
So then what's the question?
Yeah, Octa has a FastPass apparently. I'm guessing it's like Jump Cloud's agent that kind of does the same thing as Jamf Connect too.
I have no experience with FastPass personally.
Yeah, I guess my answer is I don't know. I know the Jump Cloud agent though, so I can speak to that a little bit. Which one's better? It's kind of hard to say. With the Jump Cloud agent, you need Jump Cloud. So if you don't have a Jump Cloud server, it doesn't work. I guess the big selling point with Jump Cloud over Jamf Connect is that Jump Cloud allows you to like deprovision an account. But I kind of don't care about that because for me, it's kind of a security thing where it's like you can disable an account through Jump Cloud, which is cool, but users can get around that super easy. So I really don't care about it. If you have a user that's, if you fire a user and they know what they're doing, they're going to be able to get around that stuff if they need to. So for me, I don't really care that much about it. But some people do. So that's one reason to go with Jump Cloud from a security standpoint. I kind of have a lot of stuff on here. I think the main thing I want to point on is just change management, because I don't think people think about this when they implement stuff like Jamf Connect. It is a big thing to take into account because you are changing the way that users change their password. So when you have to implement something like Nomad or Jamf Connect or even binding to AD, if you're implementing that nowadays, you have a lot of change management with your users because if they change something outside of their Mac, their password on their Mac isn't going to automatically change. It's a sync with the server, especially if they're file vault encrypted. There's no way that Jamf Connect or any utility can change a file vault password. So if the user changes their Octa or Azure password outside of their Mac, they will be then using their old password. And in every environment I've worked in, I've always had issues with users not understanding that. And sometimes, worst case scenario, it would wipe their computer because somehow everything got messed up. We didn't have a file vault recovery key. You're always running the risk of that. Obviously, users kind of have to manage their own passwords, but a lot of times they just don't seem to understand how that works.
Thanks, Chris. Wes, do you have a question?
Oh, I have my hand raised, but I don't.
Okay.
Cool.
Chris, did you see Wes's
Just
previous
partying.
question though about the M1 in the chat?
Oh, virtualization available on the M1 Max yet? Are you talking about like VMware Fusion, Wes?
Yeah, well, earlier you mentioned you were running a VM with M1, but I didn't quite catch if the host that you
So
were
the host was actually an Intel machine.
Okay.
I actually haven't tried virtualization on the M1. I just got it, and I've been fooling around with it. But yeah, I'm guessing they're probably having problems with that.
Yeah, I haven't been able to get Fusion working on the M1. It's probably going to take some time for VMware to catch up. But I haven't tried any other. I haven't tried VirtualBox or anything else just yet.
Yeah. Cool. Getting into that, I'm gonna move forward and start talking about the M1 chip. As always, I seem to be going a little bit longer than I'd hoped. I was gonna show kind of how Jamf Connect was set up, but I think Sagar, if I'm saying your name right, kind of says it best. Jamf Connect is pretty much straightforward. I probably don't need to show that. There's a lot of stuff out there on how to set it up. I would say probably the hardest part about the setup is getting it set up with your identity provider. The stuff within Jamf there's a lot of caveats to it, but yeah.
I guess if I were to add anything to that, what we've seen in our environment is prior to me joining the company, they had deployed Jamf Connect with a good percentage of the computers still bound to Active Directory running as mobile accounts. And so that caused a bit of a headache. And so what we've decided to do in the interim is basically just deploy the menu bar app, because we were running into a number of issues with the login window.
So the demobilize feature wasn't working?
I don't think it was set up to do that when they originally rolled it out back in 2019.
Oh, gotcha.
And so we're just going with the menu bar app for now, because we were running into a number of issues with the login window. There were a lot of reports of people not being able to log in unless they disconnected from Wi-Fi first. They had to disconnect from network first, log in through Jamf Connect login with the local fallback, and then do a manual password reset through system preferences. And then that seemed to fix things going forward. But we were running into it too much. And so we're just going with the menu bar app for now, letting everyone catch up with password syncing. And then at some point later on in the future, maybe we'll run that auth changer to reset and enable the Jamf Connect login window. But that's been the big hurdle on my side with working.
Yeah, sometimes implementing it into existing environments can be a little bit tricky.
Yeah, and we're talking 4,000 or 5,000 endpoints. So
yeah, things change a lot when you up it to that number.
Right, and we had a full mix of, some computers were previously bound, other computers weren't, and then obviously starting in early March of 2020, the company went all remote, and so it was just it started to become a bit of a headache for us.
Yeah, so I'm gonna move on to talk about the rest of this stuff.
Sure.
So we can open up to some questions at the end, because I know I'm going a little bit long. So I wanted to talk about specifically with issues I was having with testing with the Apple Silicon when I was going through the auto advanced testing. So this is the first thing that you're going to run into with doing anything, deploying packages through Jamf, deploying software through Jamf to an M1 computer, regardless if you're using auto advanced, is Rosetta 2, which is the virtualization that allows for Intel applications to run on a M1 chip Mac, is not installed by default. So you need to deploy that to the computers. It's really a simple script I can show you, but that's going to be super important to do. Second thing that I was running into, and this was intermittent, is Jamf Connect didn't pop up automatically. And I don't know if this is something that was just happening from Auto Advanced in general or from the N1 chip, but it was just going to the regular login screen and I wasn't able to create an account through that. If this did happen, it did pop up after a first restart though. But then I started running into some weird issues that I'm pretty sure had something to do with secure tokens and the boot stuff. So This is one thing I ran into one time when I was testing it and I rebooted it. It just didn't allow me to boot into the primary partition. And it said I had no users to authenticate. So the only way that I would be able to do this was to reset the computer and start over again. And then another issue I ran into was multiple times I was testing it, I just couldn't get any accounts that had a secure token when I was skipping that first account creation. And this didn't happen every time. So I just tested it again this morning and it worked fine. So, but if you do run into that place where you don't have secure tokens, I couldn't in file vault encrypt the computer at all. And there was no, if your account doesn't have secure tokens, you can't grant secure tokens to any account. If you don't know what secure tokens are, they're basically like when you first provision a computer account, I think this started in like 1013. But when you first provision a computer account, that first account you create has secure tokens. And then if that account creates any additional account, it has secure tokens too. But if an account is created through a script or some other means, not using that account's credentials, they won't have secure tokens. It's a way to prevent kind of like the crypto viruses that happen on Windows computer, where someone will encrypt a computer and then make you send them Bitcoin to be able to decrypt it and get into your files. The thing is, if you skip the account creation, it's supposed to allow that first account that is created on the computer that's supposed to have secure tokens, but I've kind of seen that to be intermittent across the board. But definitely when I was testing with the M1 chip, it was very intermittent, so that made it impossible to file vault encrypt an account. But on top of that, I couldn't even log into any account that wasn't the backdoor admin account. I created a Rocket admin account and I could log in with that account. But even if I created an account with the Rocket admin account, or if I try to use Jamf Connect to log in, any of those accounts that I created, I couldn't log into. So that was definitely a strange issue I was running into that makes me a little hesitant to use this in mass, especially if the computer has an M1 chip. So I'd love to do some more additional testing, and I'd love to see like a computer lab test this out in mass and see what type of issues they run into. But for right now, I would say maybe be a little hesitant in using this feature, especially with M1 chips.